Sure.
Welcome, Nicole Wright, the Pink Peony, and we're excited to talk about reconceptualizing funeral flowers.
So my book is Returning Home, Reconceptualized Sympathy Flowers. And I'll just start growing up gardening. So I grew up helping in my family's large vegetable garden. As kids, my sisters and I would help with it all. My mom was a big flower gardener. She had big gardens around her house. So that's that top picture there. That's spring, so not much blooming yet, but we did a lot of gardening in her yard too. Flower arranging, I remember my Aunt Lonnie, she had big flower gardens too, but I remember she'd always have arrangements in her house and it would just make her house feel so cozy. But my Aunt Lonnie was one. When I graduated high school, she gave me a business card holder with little flowers on it. And not knowing that someday I would actually be using that still for my business cards from my shop. So in 2009, at the age of 19, I was working at a holistic vet. I was an underwater treadmill technician and I was an assistant to the vet there. At that time, we were at the tail end of a recession. So 2009, my sister Jess and a friend, they decided to take part-time jobs at a local flower shop. And during the wedding season, they needed some extra hands. So on a whim, I just decided to leave the vet clinic and jump in full time. And I fell in love with designing flowers. In October of 2013, my mom Kelly and I, so my mom Kelly is the one in that picture at the way left. My sister Jess is in the middle between me and her. And then that was at the Milwaukee Beauty and Bloom in 2018, I believe that was, with my model friend Andrea. We ended up winning that year. So, but yeah, that's my mom Kelly on the left. Our business idea originally was intended to be a small grab and go flower shop, and we were going to offer natural pet food products, repurposed furniture, and local and American made art and products. Although we did offer that stuff, wedding and funeral work did become a large part of our business. So the quaint little flower shop that we intended quickly turned into a pretty busy all occasions florist, which I'm sure happens a lot for any small business florist that opens, thinking you're just going to do grab and go. But yes, you get flood of funerals and wedding work. Fun fact though, when I opened my shop, there was one piece that I had yet to design, and that was a casket spray. The reason was the florist I worked for prior to me opening designed almost all the funeral work that went out. So I commissioned my sister Jess to come and show me how to make the spray. And such as life, it probably was the largest casket spray to date that I have ever put out my door. So it was huge, it was massive, but that's how it goes. So in 2015, we purchased a historical building with the help of my family of carpenters. We fully remodeled the space into our new flower shop home, which is where we still are today. Within the last several years, we have stepped away from doing the everyday flowers and having the retail space. So I pretty much just work out of that building and I do weddings, memorials, and event flowers. I will do workshops and things from the flower shop there, the flower retail space now. This is the outdated sympathy flower books that I kind of had to experience for a while. Following our opening, we became the preferred florist for a funeral home, a local funeral home. Needing to supply them with a funeral flower book, I realized finding one absent of outdated floral displays was nearly impossible. After an extensive search, I managed to acquire a book that did not require a membership, but unfortunately, too, had the displays reminiscent of the Victorian era meets 1950s style arrangements. I found the same arrangements in every other funeral flower book and funeral flower internet search. I realized for nearly a century, florists, funeral directors, home funeral guides, and grieving families have put up with these stagnant and unattractive arrangements that we have all grown really to associate with sorrowful funeral services. For years, when consulting with grieving families, I used this same book, the outdated book that I had. I would attempt to share the beauty and benefits of sourcing local in-season blooms, designing them as fresh, reimagined garden-style sympathy arrangements, but families were unable to visualize really what I was talking about, what I was describing, and would become discouraged and just fall back on these styles that you kind of see here. I can't tell you how many times I've designed a red and white casket spray with the matching triangle piece, kind of similar to the one on the top left there, or oversized easel piece, kind of like the one on the right, that logistically is a nightmare for grieving families to transport after a service. Families have unfortunately grown accustomed to these arrangements. So here's some pictures that I just pulled off the internet. The left one is a funeral from the 1950s. You can see, I mean, black and white, of course, but you can see the styles are very similar to still sometimes what we're putting out today. The one on the right is Victorian era, so you can see the father wreath there. So everything has really just has not been updated. A book I did read quite some time ago, I think it was like 2022 when I read it, but it's called Last Rites, The Evolution of the American Funeral by Todd Hara. It was really good. You guys should check it out. He does go over a section with flowers in there and just kind of describes the history of the massive flower industry kind of starting. Okay, great changes leading to returning home. So in the wake of a year where our business, along with most other businesses, experienced a great deal of changes, I was able to step back and realize I had an opportunity to make the necessary adjustments within the funeral industry. Through this quieter time, funeral services reverted to being intimate and family focused. Floral displays were delicate and thoughtful. The realization of materialism and toxicity within the industry was more visible than ever. I recognize that we florists, funeral directors, and grieving families collectively need to band together to alter this cycle of the outdated funeral arrangements and practices. I would like to share a personal funeral experience that helped shape my convictions regarding funerals and funeral flowers. In April of 2020, my grandmother passed away. She was suffering from dementia and had been in a senior care home for a few months. Sadly, we were unable to visit her near the end due to unfortunate regulations. My grandmother, again suffering from dementia, would question why family was no longer visiting. Craving physical comfort in her last days, I believe a loving family and community are one of life's greatest blessings. When loved ones are removed from you in physical form, not being able to touch or hold, share a smile, or look into each other's eyes, your soul just can't bear it. Without that physical comfort, I believe she decided to return home. Following her passing, our family held an intimate gathering at the local funeral home. My grandmother had a special place in her heart for Hawaii, so gorgeous Hawaiian-grown flowers and foliage were delivered in from a small family farm. I designed a lei of cymbidium orchids for her to wear and a sheath bouquet to rest atop her casket. Family gathered around and enjoyed a slideshow of fond memories. This intimate family funeral reminded me that we didn't need to have a showy commercialized service with large overdone floral displays to celebrate the life of our loved one, but a simple family-oriented service, a service full of laughter, tears over the wonderful time shared, carrying on about where she is now, and a thoughtful representation of flowers that we all needed. My grandmother's funeral was not the only intimate service I provided flowers for that year. Funeral arrangements and every other occasion for that matter became less grand and more thoughtful. Now, years later, this thoughtful simplicity is here to stay. The floral industry is returning home to organic garden style designs, focusing on local and American grown flowers and foliage. Creating and naming returning home. So in 2020, I began squeezing in seasonal photo shoots between being a mother, wife, flower shop owner, and operator. Within a few years, returning home was completed. It is 100% self-funded. All photos were taken on my parents' property where I grew up as a child. Each arrangement was designed by me with local and American grown flowers and foliage. All vessels used were repurposed and all materials used were Dropbox donated. Returning home was created to assist funeral directors, home funeral guides, encouragement, and support for grieving families. Florist support. So I have a step-by-step guide in the very back with simple floral recipes for florists to go through. It's a lookbook and a proponent of minimalism and supporting local. Just like settling on a name for anything, there are usually many layers as to why the name was chosen. I really love the parable of the prodigal son in the Bible. It's Luke 15:11 through 24. This parable has many layers, but is full of love. In short, a father's son leaves home and squanders his inheritance, too ashamed to return home, thinking his father will not accept him. He lives an unimaginable life for some time. After hitting rock bottom, he finally decides he will return home to his father. His father is so excited to see him that he takes him in and throws a feast in honor of his return. His father says, "For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." A beautiful story of God welcoming us home when we are ready. In an earthly way, I visualize this parable as florists escaping commercialized floristry and returning home to their traditional and familial way of constructing and sourcing flowers and foliage. So now I'm going to move on to toxicity and materialism within the floral industry, plus ways to reduce these issues. All right, so in 2014, I found out the hard way how damaging it can be to use bare hands when floral designing with flowers and foliage steeped in herbicides, pesticides, and other toxic chemicals. My hands broke out in open sores, especially on the tips of my fingers, and my skin was completely dry and cracking. This also happened on my eyebrow area, I'm assuming just from rubbing my eyes between working and doing arrangements or things splashing on my face. So I ended up having to purchase nitrile medical gloves to prevent my bare hands from coming in contact with the toxic flower chemicals. After using gloves for some time, my skin thankfully did clear up. But to this day, when working with flowers that are not organic, I do have to wear gloves every time. I strongly encourage most everybody else to do the same, because when you come in contact with those toxins, anything can get absorbed into your bloodstream that touches your skin or gets into an open wound. And I do remember as a kid, our lawn was always sprayed with chemicals. And I did have a lab that in her senior years ended up getting cancer on her paws, which I do see not a coincidence that that would happen. When I worked at the vet, I saw many cases of dogs developing hotspots from lawn toxic chemicals as well. I also worked at a salon where the salon manager, who was also the most sought after stylist, developed skin issues from working with hair dyes all day. So she had to wear gloves all the time too. So it really is, it's a big issue. And I've known a lot of florists who do have to use gloves now. All of Returning Home's arrangements were designed with American grown blooms, most of which were locally grown, some of which were organic. But right now that's not completely doable year round, especially. But we're doing our best. We take baby steps. So I do love to compost. I will only compost organic flowers, though. I do not compost anything that I know has any pesticides, herbicides, or other chemicals on it, because I do not want that getting into my soil and then getting onto my plants that I grow at home. Now Returning Home's arrangements were all made without floral foam. In the floral portion of the section, you will see arrangements including their internal construction. So you can see at the top there, that is the mechanics of an urn or candle wreath that I have in the book. Within the floral industry in the last decade, dangers of floral foam has been talked about more and more. I do follow, I'm sure a lot of you guys do too, sustainable floristry and no floral foam. This was something that was posted on Sustainable Floristry's Instagram page, and I really liked it. So I thought I'd share. So floral foam is made from plastic. Plastics are synthetic materials that do not exist in nature. It cannot be recycled. The only end-of-life options for floral foam are landfill or incineration. Under normal conditions, floral foam sheds countless microplastics. Microplastics move very easily into soil and water systems. Once in the environment, microplastics can cause health problems for humans and animals. Within the last year, I have been researching mold toxicity. I recently saw a florist who has been off of Instagram for some time pop back on and mentioned she had experienced issues with mold. She talked about how we as florists are exposed to mold often. She also said that she now tries to use gloves when she's designing to protect herself. So I shared a picture on there of mold on flowers. And I mean, how many times have we gotten flowers in where the flowers in the center have just the fuzzy white, slimy mold? That bucket on the left there is just a bucket that I took a picture of one time when I was making a casket spray. And that's all just the tiny little green plastics, floating in the water that we then either dump down the drain or sometimes I would just dump in the yard. So that is getting into our soil. All right, materialism. So it's time to withdraw from the uber consumerism of this commercialized industry and return to repurposing vessels and supplies and design from our hearts. All vessels used in Returning Home were either left in my Dropbox, purchased for little cost from resale shops, or antique pieces from home. I think I can speak for all of us when I say we have all grown tired, along with our bank accounts, of purchasing the new up-and-coming vessels only for it to be outdated a short time later. All materials used in the book can be repurposed and the next arrangement designed in that vessel. That vessel at the top there, that was an antique vessel of mine that my grandma gave me from when she was a little girl. She remembers it in her house. So I use that on an arrangement in the book. That chicken wire, actually, I just always keep it in there. I'll pull it out to wash, and then I will rent that piece out. So I have done that. All right, a few things I do to keep waste down. So return floral boxes to wholesalers. I know a lot of people already do that, but I save rubber bands and give them to local flower farmers. Plastic wrap I use. So on this arrangement, I will save plastic wraps that come in from flowers, and I'll use them for things like this. So like in this piece, I crumpled up and stuffed it between or at the bottom to put the candlesticks on, and then I floral taped them down just because they were going to be too low in there. So you can do things like that. I will I will crumple some up and stuff it in baskets between a pot or in the basket. I'll give them to flower farmers to reuse. If you have a brick and mortar shop, I encourage you to do a return drop box. A lot of my stuff, like in the last picture on the last slide, so all that floral tape, waterproof tape, twine, people will just bring and leave. I get a lot of stuff from local funeral homes, local churches, just customers of mine will be like, I went through my garage and I don't need all this stuff, and they'll just leave it there. And it's awesome. I do like to use, I source from local potters and glass blowers. And I do rent vases out, mostly for weddings, but I do and have done that for funerals. All right, undercutting ourselves, pricing out, and working with funeral homes. We florists need to stop undercutting ourselves when pricing out arrangements. You need to be able to make a living wage commensurate with the rising costs of flowers, materials, and operational expenses. It is our obligation to work together and ensure the longevity of the floral industry for those of us who have made it our career. Be sure to factor in the amount you'd like to make per stem, and don't forget about all of your overhead. On top of that, you must charge for your time. You have a skilled craft, and your time is the product, not the flowers. Time spent processing flowers, cleaning buckets, and designing. You must thoughtfully price out arrangements to succeed in this industry. All right, so in the early years, I said yes to what seems like everything and undercut myself at every turn. You'll quickly learn that operating in such a way is not sustainable. I remember doing flowers for a couple who was holding their wedding at a very elegant and expensive venue in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I remember the bride telling me that she was just a teacher after reviewing my proposal. I was in communication with her nearly every day working up to her wedding, and I let her abuse my energy and time and undercut myself on most of the wedding. Thankfully, I now set boundaries with my clients while still being a thoughtful florist. Something that helped me immensely was having a one-on-one consultation with a wonderful florist out of Minnesota in 2020. She learned to set boundaries in her business and was a great soundboard for ways I could change. She shared with me a lawyer that helped her with her wedding contract, which was money well spent for sure. The lawyer's name is Wynn Reese. If anybody ever wants to reach out to her, she's awesome. I hope she still assists creative entrepreneurs. But yeah, she is really good. All right, so the back of Returning Home is a step-by-step guide for you, the designer. It is laid out in an easy floral form, recipe form. Each page has an arrangement from each section of the lookbook, including a picture of the arrangement, photos of internal mechanics of some, flowers used along with how many stems were used, dried flowers and foliage used, construction materials, dimensions of the finished arrangement, suggestions on some, and notes with further descriptions on some. As we all know, pricing will fluctuate wherever you are designing. As for me, I triple or quadruple the wholesale cost of flowers and greenery. I usually double or triple the wholesale cost of construction materials. My labor charge is usually $2 per minute. I did not include labor time in my floral recipes because we all design at such different times. I didn't think that was something necessary to include. My local delivery fee is $15 only if I'm dropping off flowers. If my client would like me to take time to set up, I will charge accordingly. For instance, the spring grounded spray in Returning Home requires setup on location. Setting this piece up would take me about 10 minutes. I would charge about $2 per minute on the setup. I always say don't forget this cost is on top of the delivery fee. For rental items, I usually charge half or the full wholesale cost of the item each time. If they do not return the rented item, or if the item is returned unclean or damaged, I will charge the card they provided for me for that specific item. If it was a vase, I will not miss. I usually won't charge anything, if it's a loss, whatever, it's not a big deal. But before I do this, I will let the client know. And most of the time, they're understanding. They know that it happened. Explain your rental agreement, though, really good before renting anything out to the customer. If I need to also spend time packing things up and breaking anything down, I will figure out how long it would take me and charge about $2 per minute for that as well. What's nice about using only local blooms is that you know what's available that week and from what farms and wholesalers. Keep a list of the availability, including cost per stems and bundles. While I crunch numbers, I'll let families sit for a minute. I may tell them I will get back to them with totals as soon as possible. This way I feel confident that I didn't undercut myself or anything like that. Think of it the way of a contractor coming to your house. I recently had an old chimney removed from my roof. The contractor came out, took a look at what I needed or what needed to be done, popped into his car to crunch numbers, and came back out to tell me the total. So if you're taking a minute to make sure you're pricing out correctly while the family kind of waits there, that shouldn't be a problem for them. All right, so now we are on to the middleman companies. I often have customers ask me if I'm affiliated with any middleman companies because they are fed into thinking that that's the only way flowers can be chosen or ordered. Thankfully, the number of customers that still ask has gone down dramatically within the last decade. Unfortunately, these companies are able to survive by florists utilizing their services, paying their membership fees, their websites, which promote unnatural and outdated arrangement styles, and their sympathy flower books. I encourage you to reject these fees and percentages deducted from each arrangement and disassociate with the internet presence of generic one-sided arrangements, which we cannot even guarantee the floral availability of, which all but ensure complaints about the differences. It's time we withdraw from the uber consumerism of the commercialized industry and return to repurposing vessels and supplies and design from the hearts. People are finally utilizing Google search properly and calling florists directly or utilizing the slow flowers directory, which is really great. Very rarely I will get a call from a middleman company looking to order the most unusual arrangement for next to nothing. I have never once accepted an order from these companies, but my heart goes out to the florists that feel this is the only way. I don't think I could handle making the same sparse, outdated floral displays day after day and feel good with myself and be okay delivering them to unfortunate customers. I've seen some of these arrangements delivered to funerals, and my heart just hurts for the person that made them and the person that ordered them. Most of the time, the florist did what they could with the amount of money she was given and flowers she had on hand to design with. All right, working with funeral homes. About 80% of my grieving families order flowers through the funeral home. This is because a lot of people set up a funeral plan where the key costs of the funeral are taken care of by the deceased before passing away. If a family is choosing their flowers at the funeral home with the funeral director, they may take a percentage of each arrangement. Before I take a funeral flower book to a funeral home, I will ask them what their percentage is. For instance, I have a funeral home that takes 10% per arrangement that's ordered through them. When I put pricing in their lookbook, which I do with just little mini price tag stickers, I make sure I add 10% on top of the price that I look to get back. Each year, I retrieve my sympathy flower book, maybe once or twice. I will do that depending on pricing. If I feel I need to, I'll grab my flower books back and I'll update the pricing. Some families have a final total they can spend, including arrangements, delivery, and tax. So be sure to remind your funeral director that all arrangements shown in returning home can be adjusted. Also remind them that blooms may vary week to week and to trust that the florist will design within the intended color scheme the family is envisioning while sourcing seasonal blooms. They don't need to get too specific if the family has trust in them and the florist. They don't have confidence in themselves to assist a family with the funeral flower process. Tell them not to hesitate to call for assistance. Some families may prefer just to meet you, the florist, in person. In returning home, I have a section called A Note to Funeral Directors and Home Funeral Guides that has everything they need to know about the book, how to assist grieving families with the book, and how they have become a major asset to florists who are essentially returning home. Funeral homes are assisting florists in sourcing from farms in the local area, state, or country, helping us design in the intended natural way that has been lost in the funeral industry for nearly a century. With their support, they are improving the way future grieving families will envision funerals. A note to grieving families. I offer a section in returning home for grieving families. I explain the layout of the book, why using a florist who sources from local and American-grown farms is important, how the families can maximize their arrangement after the service. I share my personal funeral experience that I shared with you guys earlier that helped shape my convictions regarding funerals and funeral flowers. And I share a note of comfort to them as well. So I became a mother in 2015 and had my second in 2016. I remember having 4 outdoor hot August weddings booked for the day my son was due. Thankfully, he came 4 days later. I had a funeral order to design only 48 hours after giving birth. Looking back, I don't know why I did this to myself. I could have simply referred the family to a neighboring florist. I was blessed to be able to take my kids to work with me, but I took on too much. In 2016, I ended up having gallbladder issues. I put it off for so long before going to the hospital that I literally was making arrangements in such pain that I would lay on the floor between designing. The night before Thanksgiving, when things calmed down, wedding wise and all Thanksgiving centerpieces were out of the door, I finally went to get help, but then spending Thanksgiving Day in the hospital. I put my own health last for way too long. This is very standard. This is a very standard thing, I think, for florists. We are people pleasers for sure. I remember having nightmares on a very regular occasion that I would wake up the morning of weddings and never have ordered flowers or designed anything. So thank God that never actually happened. But I know so many florists who have these same nightmares all the time. But we need to slow down with this commercialized floral industry ourselves. If you are a mom in flowers, I feel for you. We have this one life, don't waste it away from the things you love. I am so thankful to be a present mom with my children and wife for my husband while still doing what I love for a career. Okay, so back to the book. So the winter section. The winter section offers a sheath bouquet, and that is the picture of the sheath bouquet in those, that's in the book. I have a candle piece and a wreath and a standing sheath bouquet. Customers really love the sheath bouquet in this section. Being a Wisconsin florist, all of the fresh blooms were ordered through my local wholesaler. So obviously I don't have any blooms here in Wisconsin available in the winter besides the evergreens. I did forage for my own evergreens. What's nice about sheath bouquets is that they are easy for families to transport after the service and can be pulled apart to share amongst family and friends. These bouquets can be used flanking an urn, picture, or in place of a casket spray or on top of the casket. If sheath bouquets are left behind at a cemetery, it will naturally decompose. I urge you to research the soil toxicity of cemeteries. Among other things, left behind sympathy arrangements full of chemical ridden flowers and floral foam leach into the area's soil and the groundwater. All right, so now on to spring. I love spring, and this section was one of my most favorite sections to design in the book. This first picture is of the hyacinth bulb memorial display. I really like this option for families because each person can grab a bulb and then plant that, and then that's something that they can enjoy every year. I also included the sympathy basket. It's a good option to deliver directly to a loved one's home. Not always a good option for taking to a service, but just something cozy for them to have going through something. I do have the grounded spray, which is the one on the top left there. It's a unique alternative to a casket spray designed in a long vessel and the base covered with drop box moss. So somebody gave me a huge bag of moss. So on location, that is something I would have to kind of cover. So that is something where when you're pricing out, you'd have to charge for that time to set up the moss over it. The candle bottle spray is another unique option for casket displays. Families love when they can take the bud vase of blooms home with them. I've also rented that piece out, so people will grab just the flowers and then they'll bring all those little bud vases and the candle holders back after. The antique piece on the top, I designed, like I said before, in an heirloom of mine, in my family's, and it's a reminder to other families that they can bring in their own vessels and containers for us to design in their things too. All right, so on to late spring and early summer. The pansy candle wreath or urn wreath was designed to show families that these pieces can be made using small plants. I designed a lot of casket lid pieces. This one was created with bendable blooming curly willow, the one pinned into the casket lid. The reimagined casket spray was designed in a low ceramic pot with a ball of chicken wire and waterproof tape for extra strength. The spring blooms are flowing and bendable, making it easy to design with. So if you do something like that, you can make it lower, taller, but those flowers just kind of flow out nice, kind of like a true, vintage casket spray. I incorporated a simple garland of plumosa, which reminds me a lot of how they do garlands around caskets in Europe. They do that a lot. All right, late summer and early autumn. This urn or candle memorial arrangement was designed in a low ceramic pot. The interior mechanics are a cylinder vase turned upside down and centered to hold the urn or candle, and a ring of chicken wire taped around to hold the flowers in place. This has really become one of my favorites to offer. I used to design urn and candle pieces with foam rings, and it feels great to not have to spend all that extra money on them. I do understand that the ceramic pot can be pricey. The specific one was also donated to me in my Dropbox, but you can offer to rent it out or express to the family how they can use it after the service as well. In this section, I also created a sheath bouquet, a garden style vase arrangement, various vessels, design options, and another unique standing spray. And there's some of those. There's the sheath bouquet, a candle memorial arrangement, pedestal container. Almost all the blooms in here were organic flowers, and I did put that in this section, that all the blooms and greenery in this section were sourced from Wisconsin farms and are fully organic, those ones. And I believe one of the farmers that I got a lot of that stuff from, she is a Slow Flowers member as well. Okay, so let me see if I'm on the right one. Here we go. So now on to autumn. Another one of my favorite pieces in the candle pedestal is the candle pedestal arrangement in the autumn section. I designed these a lot around the holidays as well. I did kind of discuss this one earlier. The standing bouquet in this section doubles as a laying casket sheath bouquet. I designed this one by hand the exact same way I would design a bridal bouquet. The standing casket sprayer pedestal arrangement is to replace the triangle sympathy style everyone has become so accustomed to. I taped a tall gathering vase in the back of a low ceramic pot. The tall vase works for holding up the taller blooms and greenery in the back. I still have this exact vessel with that exact vase waterproof taped in, that I've actually rented that out and done similar arrangements. In our autumn section, just one of our year-round dried flower options. I save, I'm sure like any other florist, anytime there's flowers that don't make it into an arrangement, I always save them and dry them in my basement at my shop. And this arrangement was created with just that, plus a few pops of fresh flowers. The tropical section, all flowers and greenery in this section were brought in from a small farm in Hana, Maui. Although those blooms do come from far away, some families really want tropical blooms to memorialize their loved one. And in Hawaiian culture, it is a symbol of love and respect to use leis for their deceased loved ones. So the red, white, and blue blooms are a wonderful way for families to honor their veteran loved one. The folded flag in these photos were from my grandpa's funeral. I enjoyed styling this shoot on a rainy summer day. Brass and copper vessels and candle holders go well with patriotic pieces. So you guys can place an order for returning home on my website under my shop or under shop. You can choose between the paperback, which has a plastic cover for water spills and things like that. So that's a good one for florists or flower farmers to use. The hardcover, which is technically, I guess, not a hardcover. It's more like a really thick cardstock. That one has a cute, unique cover on it. It's the green one. That one is more for, funeral homes or a florist that wants to have that book for when a family does come in to look at a book. And then I also have an ebook version. So that's great for all parties. If the funeral home wants to do something like that, or if you guys want to save money on just being able to quick pull it up on your computer, that works out really great. The promo code, I do have a promo code for all Slow Flowers members and anybody watching today. So that would just be all caps, Slow Flowers. If you buy 2 books, you get 1 free. Or if you just want to get 1 book, Slow Flowers 20 is 20% off of a single book order. These are not one-time codes, so you guys could use this multiple times. If you have a lot of funeral homes that you take books to, you can do that. You can follow us on the Pink Peony LLC, or I do have one specifically for the book that's at Returning Home Floral, or on our website. I post a lot of stuff on there. And then I just have a little note. So for anyone that orders, I hope this book serves you all by helping you get closer to removing the commercialism and toxic and outdated funeral styles from your businesses and from the earth. We are changing the floral and funeral industry one funeral flower book at a time. Welcome back to memorializing our loved ones, not materialistically, but beautifully and naturally simple. We are returning the floral industry home. Okay, so those are the 2 different book cover options that I was talking about. The floral one is the white one with the plastic covering, and then the one that more so is best for like funeral homes and things like that is the green cover. I have an upcoming event in June on the 21st. If you're in Wisconsin, Verona, Wisconsin, I'm going to be at the Natural Path Sanctuary Death Education Market. I'll be answering questions there and have my book, and I will be sharing the space with Kathy. She's the president of the National Association of Certified Death Midwives. She is really great, and she's going to be there helping out too and answering questions on their end. I am hoping to connect this association with florists around the country by utilizing Soul Flowers directory because they have a hard time just kind of finding florists in our same wheelhouse, somebody who's going to source local, use fresh blooms from the season. So midwives and funeral directors of this organization have started utilizing my book to offer to their local florists and to their grieving families. I'm currently also planning my own online natural funeral conference with some hopes of connecting various groups in the funeral industry, so all over the funeral industry. So some speakers I already have committed are a local flower farmer in Wisconsin, who is also a Slow Flowers member, a local Wisconsin floral wholesaler, a funeral director, and kind of one on a funeral director on both kind of spectrums, one that's just kind of a standard one, and then one that does do green practices, a local Wisconsin green cemetery director, a wicker casket maker, which she's amazing. And you guys can see in some of my pictures, I did try to use a wicker casket for a lot of the pictures. Otherwise, there was a pine casket. And then I have a hospice nurse for pets and a hospice nurse for humans, a death midwife, a counselor, myself, and hopefully you, Deborah, if that's something that you were able to do.
The first question was early in the presentation, you referred to finding a funeral book that did not require membership. Were you talking about like FTD or Teleflora?
Yes.
Or...
So, and that's what I worry about saying that because I don't know if I could get in trouble for technically saying that, but
I said it, not
yeah,
you.
so you said it first. So when I was actually writing my book, that was something that I did have to consult with that lawyer about. So she said that I could not say specific names to companies or things like that. When I was looking, I had a really hard time finding a book because I couldn't just get that book. I was not going to become a member of FTD, and I couldn't buy a book that way. So I really had to hunt down and find a book that didn't require a membership for me to get it. So yeah.
So in creating your book, roughly how many funeral homes have you been able to give this to and kind of onboard to in your market that you're working with?
So I have 4 right now, which isn't, and I take on as much as I can. So if somebody does more, that's awesome. Some people just do 1 funeral home and that's enough time for them. I remember when I just had 1 in the beginning and doing weddings and all that kind of stuff, it was just, it's a lot. So
4 sounds like a lot too. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, but I only take on what I can. So I'm really honest. Like I said in my section, I'm really honest. If I'm not available, there's local florists that I will refer them to because, sure. You can't do it all,
Yeah. Katie Broadman, first of all, she complimented you on the name and the cover art. So beautiful. But I think maybe we should talk about your Dropbox is where people bring their leftovers. So Katie was asking, are you reusing waterproof tape or are people just bringing you their unused tape for you to incorporate into your business?
Both. So if I have a container where it's, sometimes you'll use one and it'll start like peeling off. And if I have to take it off, I will and throw it away. But yeah, people do bring me rolls of waterproof floral tape, but it does go a long way. So I don't have, thousands of rolls. I have probably currently like 8 rolls at my shop. But yes, I can clean an arrangement that already has that floral tape still on it and just reuse that the best.
And get multiple uses out of the tape.
Get multiple uses out of that.
It is a plastic, so I can see where you're hesitant to use it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Rachel Burgoon just said, thank you for not skipping the mom in the floral industry part. She needed to hear that. So thank you.
Very important one because as a florist, we do a lot and it's a lot to do with kids and a lot to do with the home. So yeah.
A follow-up question from Katie. What is the base mechanic for the grounded spray? So the grounded spray that you were talking about laying the moss over, how did you hold water and hold flowers?
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I should have had a picture in there next to it. And sorry, my dog's sleeping next to me and he's having a nightmare. If you can hear him. But no, so it was somebody gave me this really long, it was from her, like a small wedding that she had. I think it was in like 2020, but it was like a really long rectangle clear glass vase. And I just did chicken wire down that. And I did Davy tape because obviously those flowers are tall. So if you don't have, that chicken wire could just pop forward if you don't have it Davy taped in. So yeah, it was just a real long, clear rectangle vase, and I did chicken wire and then just the flowers in there from
Mm.
that. So
Hmm. And
some flowers
that,
I did have to add once I had it sitting. So that's why I like to talk about the setup. So sometimes kind of like a wedding, you bring as much kind of design as possible and then kind of tweak it once it's there. And then that moss, yeah. So once it was sitting is when I put the moss down.
well, thank you so much. People are really appreciating the work you put into this. I guess I want to comment personally that I liked the thoughtfulness about creating takeaways for family members. You had it with the hyacinths in the jars, and then also the mix of I think were you saying they were bud vases or candle holders that you had a collection on top of a casket? How have
Yeah,
people
so
responded to those?
they really love those. So I do, I like I said, when I was showing that one, so the one with the bud vases and the candle holders, I do rent out a lot of those. Some people have taken where they buy the vases and then take them with. So those vases, you can get a lot of those at antique places or resale shops, things like that. But yeah, people love that. What was the first one you
Oh, the
said?
one with the hyacinth bulbs.
Hi, yeah. So that one, people take it in the vase. I have had people bring those vases back. I use those a lot for like weddings for pillar candles, those
Mm,
specific vases, but
mhm,
so I will reuse those. But yeah, you can
mhm.
do either way.
That sounds great. And then Tonali, our membership manager, just really commented that she loved the use of produce. So was that like
Oh,
particularly with a family's gardening interest in mind, or
so
was it?
I have done plenty of that specific. I did that shoot and I added, so that was on my family's property, and they have a little mini orchard of apple trees. And I knew the flowers that the farmer had on hand, and they just were, they were the same perfect colors with the apples, so it worked out. But I've done so many where you're using like oranges and things like that in there. So yeah, apples are a big one too. But yeah, incorporating that is really something if a family, if a family member has an apple orchard or it's that time of year, it's cute to put those
Mm,
in the arrangements.
mm. I think we have time for two more questions. Kim Bryan asked about the sympathy baskets. Is that something that is an opportunity to send to the family, the bereaving family, or what was in that?
Yeah, so let me pull, so I know there was wool socks, there was a wool blanket. I'm trying to think. I had hot cocoa. What else did I have? I'm trying to pull it up so I can, because I can't remember.
Yeah, I love that. So you're kind of, yeah, there we go. It's a sympathy basket
Oh,
that,
perfect.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it had that little cross ornament was in there. It was a local made ceramic mug. There was forget-me-not seeds that I put in our own. I have little brown paper packets that sometimes I'll give people seeds of my own. So I had that on hand. And then a little journal because sometimes when somebody's going through something like that and grieving, just journaling your thoughts at that time, it's just something thoughtful to give to
It's
somebody
beautiful.
going through that. So yeah, the basket is more so for somebody not to send to the service typically, but to send to somebody's home
Yeah,
before the service even.
it's really special. Um, Katie added a comment about community, and I was going to add to that as well. It seems like what has made this work for you in your community is you have these relationships with the funeral homes, but also other green funeral industry professionals and the doulas, and like you've really found people who I'm assuming are in a position to recommend you to families who've lost someone.
Yeah. Yeah. In Milwaukee, there are a few home funeral directors. So if a family is wanting to go completely green, I guess you would call it, and they want to do a home service, there's a whole process in that. And that usually within 3 days, you do have to bury the dead with that. But yeah, so there's families that I have my book with those home guides, and they'll show the family that. And then that's really good because it, of course, has to be local grown flowers, most likely at that time. And, you have to design quick for something like that. So yeah, they're on a whole nother section that's getting big too. The funeral industry on that end is starting to turn a lot more to green funerals and going green even with how they're handling their loved one.
Well, I was just going to comment at the Northwest Flower and Garden Festival in Seattle, which is the #2 garden show in the country. there were 2 exhibitors for green funeral services, which was
Oh,
interesting
good.
that they're seeing the crossover to horticulture and floriculture and gardening as the natural, you know, highly interested customer who would want to know about those services. So it is moving
Yeah,
into the mainstream, not fast, but with
right.
help from people like
Slowly.
you.
Yeah, and if
Yeah.
everybody wants to check out too, that place I'm going to be on June 1st, that is a green burial cemetery. So there are no, I believe everything is just GPS located for that. So it's kind of just neat to kind of read what they're all about and look at that. And she only allows flowers that are natural flowers to be brought onto the property when somebody is doing a burial there. So
Mm. Well, lots of thank yous from people, farmers and farmer florists and floral designers who have attended today. Nicole, when
yeah, thank
we're
you.
going to share this next week as the podcast, and I will get those links from you to put in the show notes, so everybody who's here today can basically see the whole presentation again and go back and refer. And people can reach out to you too if they've got specific questions. I'm sure you've been so generous with your knowledge, Nicole, and we wish you huge success with this book and also just spreading the word. And, we want to do that as well because it's a tool that everyone can use.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It is. And if anybody wants to reach out and, talk, I'm more than happy to help, in any way I can or with any
Mm,
question you have, or,
great.
I can set up a call or just email me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicole. This is wonderful. I thank everyone for being with us today. It was a lot of information, and I'm so grateful for your patience as we really wanted Nicole to give that whole presentation of her path to flowers and this specific sort of emerging niche of our industry. We are going to meet again on April 11th, Friday, April 11th, my mom's 90th birthday, by the way. And both on April 11th and on May 9th, our next 2 sessions, we're going to feature flower farmers who are in my new book, The Flower Farmers, which will be out in May. And that'll be really fun and kind of a good conversation just to talk about what's happening in our community. And we will share, as I said, we'll share this next week as a Slow Flowers podcast episode. So thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Really appreciate all of the great comments and engagement. And we'll do a drawing early next week for one of you to receive a complimentary copy of Nicole's book. Thanks so much. Take care, everybody.